After 3 years of marriage, Sally suddenly received a wedding invitation from her husband Boris. Sally was stunned, her first thought being that someone was playing a prank, but the one who sent her the invitation was her niece Susan. And the bride on the invitation was also Susan. Sally felt a heavy weight in her chest, filled with confusion and unease. She immediately flew abroad and followed the address on the invitation. Sure enough, a wedding was taking place there. Her husband Boris had his arm around her niece Susan's waist as they both smiled and toasted the guests. Time seemed to freeze at that moment, and for an instant, Sally even doubted whether she was seeing correctly. Perhaps this man just resembled her husband Boris a little too closely, but the fireworks exploding in the sky shattered her last illusion. In a foreign land, the blue fireworks formed standard Chinese characters in the air. Congratulations to Boris and Susan on their wedding. Sally, her mind went blank, her ears filled with a sharp ringing, and her stomach churned violently. The intense emotions transformed into physical pain as she covered her mouth and rushed to the bathroom to vomit. Just then, Boris and his groomsmen also arrived at the bathroom. On the other side of the wall, Sally heard the groomsmen laughing and saying, "Boris, this move of yours is absolutely brilliant, marrying Sally domestically and Susan abroad, one at home, one overseas. Both given marriage, both given respectability. Who says you can't have your cake and eat it too? I, Boris, have managed both. But how come I remember it's always been that little girl Susan chasing after Boris?" While Boris wasn't the least bit interested in her. Hearing this, Boris's midnight dark eyes dimmed slightly. "I originally had no feelings for Susan. In my eyes, she was just a child, but during the 2 years I was disabled, it was always Susan who took care of me. No matter how I hit her, scolded her, or told her to get lost, she always stayed by my side, never leaving or abandoning me. The girl loved so passionately that even with a heart of stone, I couldn't remain unmoved." On the other side of the wall, Sally was already in tears. So the two of them had gotten together as early as 3 years ago. Boris and Sally were childhood sweethearts. From a young age, he displayed an intense possessiveness towards Sally. During school, if any boy talked to Sally a little too much, he would beat them up, but he was extremely gentle with Sally. Sally loved Cantonese dim sum, so he would wake up 2 hours early every day to buy it for her from the other side of town. Continuing this routine for over a decade, from elementary school all the way through college, on Sally's 18th birthday, he lit thousands of river lanterns to confess his feelings. "Sally, be my girlfriend. I won't accept a no. If you refuse, I'll just tie you up and take you home." On Sally's 22nd birthday, he lit thousands of sky lanterns again. The night sky was filled with floating lanterns, each bearing his handwritten wish, "Sally, marry me." He was arrogant and domineering. Even his marriage proposal was a declarative sentence, never accepting a negative answer. Sally had been protected by him all her life and never thought of refusing. She loved Boris. She loved both his dominance and his tenderness. Unfortunately, shortly after they got married, Boris was set up by enemies and got into a car accident, leaving him disabled in both legs. The once proud and domineering man suddenly became a cripple confined to a wheelchair. Boris couldn't bear such a drastic fall from grace. He became irritable and prone to anger, even developing tendencies towards self-harm and suicidal thoughts. In less than 3 months, he had tormented himself beyond recognition. "Sally, the person I am now is utterly worthless. I no longer deserve to be with you, yet I can't stand the thought of you being with another man. The mere idea of you leaving me and falling into another man's arms fills me with such jealousy that I feel like destroying the entire world. Sally, I don't want to hurt you. I've already drafted and signed the divorce papers, but as long as I'm alive, I can't bear the thought of you leaving me. Let me die, only then will you be free." Sally naturally refused. She loved Boris, and even though he was disabled, her love for him remained unchanged. But at that time, Boris was determined to die, and no matter how much Sally cried or pleaded, it was useless. In her despair, Sally was suddenly invited by her mentor to participate in a research project studying drugs that activate spinal cord nerve cells. Boris was paralyzed precisely because his spinal cord was severely injured. If the drug research succeeded, Boris might be able to stand up again. Sally saw a glimmer of hope and immediately accepted her mentor's invitation. The research team was abroad. Boris couldn't bear Sally being so far away from him, so he commissioned a heart-shaped necklace made of pure gold and personally installed a miniature camera inside it. "Sally, I might be sick," Boris said, but I must control everything about you, or I'll go mad. You're my life, I can't let you out of my sight. Sally knew about his obsessive need for control. To reassure him, she willingly put on the necklace and flew abroad. 2 years later, Sally returned with a new drug. The new drug was remarkably effective, and after a brief rehabilitation period, Boris truly stood up again. Sally was moved to tears, believing she had saved her marriage, thinking that the once powerful and influential Boris had returned to her side, yet who could have imagined that during the 2 years she was abroad, her own niece had taken advantage of the situation and seized everything that rightfully belonged to her, and she, like a fool, remained completely unaware of it all, even frequently inviting her niece to stay at her home. Sally struggled free from her memories with tear-filled eyes. Then she heard Boris command in an icy tone, "This matter must absolutely not reach Sally's ears. Everyone keep your mouths shut. If anyone dares to leak a word, don't blame me for being ruthless." The groomsmen also laughed and said, "Don't worry, Boris, how would we dare? Sally's temper is no secret to us. She can't tolerate the slightest flaw. If she finds out about you and Susan, she'll leave you for good, and we'd have to atone with our lives." Sally smiled faintly. In a daze, she left the wedding banquet and boarded a flight home. Feeling as if she were half dreaming the entire way, everything seemed so unreal. After returning home, Sally retrieved a divorce agreement from the safe. "This is Boris's divorce agreement, personally signed by him when he was disabled." At the time, Sally didn't sign it, but now, she signed her name on it without hesitation. "Boris, I never thought that what ultimately defeated us wasn't your disability, but the mere 2 years we spent apart. You said that during those 2 years of your disability, Susan never left your side. Then what about me? What does it make me? The one who ran to the desert for you, working day and night under your surveillance to extract drugs and conduct research for you. Since you can't be loyal, then I don't want you anymore." After signing the divorce agreement, Sally dialed her mentor's number. "Teacher, I've changed my mind," Sally said. "I'm willing to rejoin the research team and go to the Atlantic to develop the new drug." "Really? That's wonderful," the mentor exclaimed excitedly. "The research team will depart for the Atlantic in 10 days, and the military will send someone to pick you up then. But I must remind you, this new drug development is a national classified project. Once you join, you'll completely vanish from the world. Your husband is so controlling. Will he agree to this?" Hearing this, Sally gave a bitter smile. "It's fine, he already has a new wife. I won't be his caged bird anymore." Before, she was willing to be Boris's puppet because she loved him, but now the heart that loved him has been torn apart by his own hands, never to be whole again. After hanging up the phone, Sally began packing her things in a daze, but before she could finish packing, Boris returned. "Sally, why have you taken out the suitcase? Are you going on a long trip?" Boris frowned and said, "Where are you going? Why didn't you inform me in advance? I've only been away on business for a week, and you're already trying to leave home without telling me." Sally lowered her eyes. "Do I not even have the right to go out anymore?" "Of course not." Boris softened his tone to coax her. "I'm just worried about your safety. After all, when I first came to power, I acted too ruthlessly and made many enemies. If you want to go on a long trip, I can accompany you." "Sally, you are my life. I can't bear to have you out of my sight." Sally didn't speak, only silently thinking to herself, "What a pity, because in 10 days I'll completely vanish from your world. I just returned from a business trip. You're not allowed to go anywhere now. Just stay by my side." Boris took away Sally's suitcase, then lowered his head to kiss her. "Be good, I've prepared a surprise for you in the rose garden." Boris always brings Sally gifts whenever he returns from a business trip. He would hide the gifts in various corners of the house, then watch with adoration as Sally plays treasure hunt around the house. This used to be the couple's favorite game to play. Every time Boris was away on business, Sally would eagerly await his early return. But now, there was one more person in the rose garden. "Auntie." Susan rushed over and hugged Sally's arm tightly. "Uncle sent me here. He said he prepared a gift for me during this business trip, hidden in the rose garden." Sally is Susan's biological aunt. Logically speaking, after she married Boris, Susan should have started calling Boris uncle, but Susan refused to change her address. Even though Sally had been married to Boris for 3 years, she still affectionately called him little uncle. "Auntie, let's go. We'll go treasure hunting together," Susan said excitedly. "Let's see what little uncle bought for us." What was once a treasure hunting game exclusive to the couple now included Susan. And Sally's expression darkened slightly. Noticing this, Boris softly coaxed, "Sally, don't be so petty. Yesterday was Susan's birthday, and I missed it, so I wanted to make it up to her with a gift today." Yesterday was Susan's 18th birthday. The moment she came of age, he couldn't wait to marry her. Sally was filled with desolation. Even the treasure hunt game she once loved most now felt utterly dull. In the end, Susan found a pile of gifts, while Sally only discovered a thorny rose carved from pigeon blood red diamonds. Still, Sally knows how to find the best. Boris gazed at Sally with unmistakable affection in his eyes. Though she found only one item, it was the most precious of all. Susan flashed a hint of jealousy and resentment in her eyes. She pursed her lips and whispered, "Uncle, I want the thorny rose too. I'll give all the gifts I found to Auntie. Can you let me have the thorny rose instead?" Sally remained silent, quietly looking at Boris. After 3 years of marriage, she wanted to know her weight in Boris's heart, whether it was as heavy as Susan's. Boris wore a troubled expression on his face. After a moment of silence, he handed the thorny rose to Susan. "Sally, today we're celebrating Susan's belated birthday, so just let her have this one," Boris said. "If you like the thorny rose, I'll buy you an even bigger one another day." Sally's heart sank to the depths of the ocean at that moment. He had chosen Susan. The Boris who used to prioritize her in everything had now chosen Susan first. No need. The accumulated disappointment in her heart was too much. Sally couldn't even remain calm anymore. She shook off Boris and walked away. "I only want something unique. If you've given it to someone else before, then I don't want it anymore." "Boris, the same goes for you. You can only belong to me alone. If you also belong to someone else, then I don't want you anymore." That same night, Sally received a new thorned rose sent by Boris, carved from equally precious pigeon blood red diamonds. The rose was larger and more beautiful, but Sally no longer wanted it. She tossed the thorny rose into the pool without a second glance, not even wanting to look at it again. Unexpectedly, as soon as the thorny rose sank into the pool, Susan jumped in right after it. She acted as if she intended to retrieve the thorny rose, but the pool water was clear, and the rose was large and glaringly obvious. If she truly wanted to retrieve it, she could have done so in just a few minutes. Yet, Susan lingered in the pool for nearly half an hour. It wasn't until Boris came downstairs that she finally emerged, dripping wet. "Auntie, please don't be angry anymore, okay?" Susan held the freshly retrieved thorny roses, looking pleadingly at Sally. "I don't want the thorny roses Uncle gave me yesterday anymore. I'll give both to you. Please stop being mad at Uncle." Susan was completely drenched from head to toe. She wore a pure white long dress, but the soaked hem was now entirely stained with blood. Boris's expression instantly turned terrifying. With a cold face, he rushed downstairs, quickly took off his own coat, and wrapped it around Susan. "Are you insane, jumping into the pool during your period?" Boris scolded with a dark expression. "You've always had a cold constitution and suffered from dysmenorrhea since childhood. You can't touch cold water." Susan turned pale, her face weak as she collapsed into Boris's arms, then sobbed, "Uncle, don't scold me. I just didn't want you and Auntie to argue. I don't like seeing you frown. I want you to be happy." Boris's dark eyes instantly filled with heartache, and his gaze towards Sally carried a hint of reproach. "Sally, there's a limit to jealousy. Susan is just a child. Why are you picking on her?" With that, Boris scooped Susan into his arms and took her to the hospital. Meanwhile, Sally's body couldn't stop trembling. He kept saying Susan was just a child, yet he knew exactly when her period was, knew she'd suffered from dysmenorrhea since childhood and couldn't touch cold water. Sally suddenly remembered how Boris used to accurately track her menstrual cycle, something even she couldn't remember. He'd prepare sanitary pads and heating pads in advance, watching over her constantly, forbidding her from eating anything cold. But now, his heart and eyes were filled with Susan, completely forgetting these were also the days of her period. As night fell, Susan posted a status update. "I truly am the rose my uncle dotes on, just a little menstrual pain. And he booked out the entire hospital, massaging my belly all night long." Sally stared fixedly at these words, feeling as if needles had been scattered into her eyes. Her menstrual pain was also severe. In the past, during every period, Boris would hold her on his lap, soothing her softly while massaging her abdomen with his warm, large hands. But now, Sally lay in agony, her face deathly pale, with only emptiness by her bedside. Boris already had someone else in his arms. The love he gave her was never unique. her stomach ached increasingly. Sally curled up on the bed like a wounded little beast, clutching the blanket. She was in so much pain that cold sweat dripped down, and then she fell into a dazed sleep amidst the agony. She had just fallen asleep when sudden noise erupted outside. Sally struggled to open her eyes, then heard someone outside shouting at the top of their lungs, "Fire! The rose garden is on fire, hurry and put it out." The roses in the rose garden were all Boris's handiwork. Across hundreds of acres, tens of thousands of rose bushes, each one was Boris's love letter to Sally. Sally, roses symbolize love. But store-bought roses are too cheap to represent my love for you, Boris said. That's why I built this rose garden for you. From now on, every day I'll give you roses I've grown with my own hands. Now, for some inexplicable reason, the rose garden was on fire, and Sally's heart involuntarily clenched. She threw on her coat and walked out with unsteady steps to see what was happening, but as soon as she stepped out, she was knocked over by a servant rushing to put out a fire and then fell down the stairs. When she regained consciousness, Sally found herself lying in a hospital. Boris was sitting by her hospital bed, his dark eyes bloodshot and his expression somewhat terrifying. "Sally, you're awake." Seeing that Sally had woken up, Boris's expression softened slightly. He grabbed Sally's hand and said with heartfelt concern, "You hit your head when you fell down the stairs. How do you feel now? Are you dizzy?" Sally shook her head and whispered softly, "I remember the rose garden caught fire." Boris's face darkened again as he hugged Sally and kissed her gently. "It's okay. If it's burned, then it's burned. If you like, I'll build you a new one." As soon as he finished speaking, a nurse suddenly rushed over. "Mr. Boris, Missy says she has a stomachache. Please go check on her." Boris's expression froze for a moment. He released Sally and said with forced nonchalance, "Sally, look, your sister and brother-in-law have spoiled Susan too much. Just some menstrual cramps and she's making such a fuss. I'll go check on her to make sure she doesn't bully the nurses. You rest well. I'll be back to keep you company soon." With that, he couldn't wait to leave. Sally felt a pang of bitterness in her heart. Boris, was it my sister and brother-in-law who spoiled Susan, or was it you who spoiled her? Just as she was feeling upset, her phone suddenly vibrated. Susan had sent her a video. In the video, Susan was nestled in Boris's arms, crying pitifully. "Uncle, I'm sorry, it's all my fault. I'm so clumsy. If I had been more careful while searching for the gift yesterday and hadn't gotten my hand scratched by the rose thorns, you wouldn't have sent people to set the rose garden on fire to avenge me. And Auntie wouldn't have gotten hurt." Hearing this, Boris reached out and affectionately patted Susan's head. His tone was languid, carrying the arrogance of someone in power. "It's just a rose garden. If it's burned, then so be it. Susan, you're my woman. I won't let anyone harm you, not even inanimate objects. If they dare to hurt you, I'll reduce them to ashes." The video abruptly ended here. Sally's heart shattered into pieces at this very moment. Boris once said that every rose in the garden was his confession of love to Sally, but now, just because a rose thorn scratched Susan's hand, he sent someone to burn down her rose garden. Thousands of roses, thousands of I love yous, could not compare to a single thorn that pricked Susan's finger. In the following days, Boris kept shuttling between Sally's and Susan's hospital rooms. He wanted to take care of both sides, and he didn't want to let go of either. Sally only felt heartbroken and no longer wanted to engage in further communication with Boris. However, just as she was about to recover and be discharged from the hospital, Susan suddenly appeared in her ward. "Auntie, you're really calm. You even attended my and uncle's wedding but didn't dare to expose the affair." Susan, no longer her usual innocent self, smiled with pure malice. "You're such a coward. I can actually understand you. You're old. Naturally no match for someone young and beautiful like me. You're afraid that once the truth comes out, Uncle won't want you anymore. So you deliberately put on airs, pretending everything is peaceful and fine. That way, you can deceive yourself into thinking Uncle still loves you." At this point, Susan sneered, "You older women love to delude yourselves. Since you refuse to face reality, let me, your niece, help you out." Susan spoke while pulling out a bundle of explosives from her bag with a venomous smile. Sally froze instantly, her eyes widening in disbelief as she stared at Susan. "Susan, what are you trying to do?" "Don't worry, it won't kill you." Susan smiled sweetly. "I just want you to see clearly who Uncle will save first when we're both in danger." After speaking, Susan threw the explosive to an empty corner of the room. Boom! With a deafening explosion, the house collapsed. Sally and Susan were both buried under the rubble, sand and stones flew through the air. Sally coughed violently, she tried to move but couldn't, she was stuck tight, a steel bar had pierced her shoulder, blood streaming down as her consciousness gradually faded. Amid the chaos, Sally saw Boris charging forward desperately. "Boris, I'm here," Sally shouted with her last ounce of strength, "save me," yet Boris seemed completely oblivious to Sally's pleas for help. His eyes were solely fixed on Susan. The man lifted the boulder crushing Susan, then pulled her protectively into his arms, his face filled with anguish. "Susan, don't be afraid, Uncle is here." Boris, who had always remained unshaken even in the face of catastrophe, now wore a rare expression of panic. He held Susan tightly, as if wishing to merge her into his very flesh and blood. Sally's tears poured forth uncontrollably in that instant. She could only watch helplessly as Boris carried Susan away, without even glancing back at her. "Boris, this is my hospital room." Sally lay in the ashes, letting her tears flow unchecked. "Boris, this is my hospital room. Did you really not know I was inside? Or is it that right now, your eyes and heart are completely filled with Susan, leaving no room for anything else?" Sally's world also collapsed in that moment, leaving behind only endless darkness. When she woke up again, Sally found herself back at home. "Sally, you're finally awake." Boris's voice trembled slightly, his eyes bloodshot, his entire mental state visibly unstable. "If anything had happened to you, I would have blown up the entire hospital." Sally remained silent. Boris carrying Susan away was still deeply etched in her mind, leaving only sorrow and desolation in her heart. "Sally, are you upset that I saved Susan first?" Boris hesitated. "I didn't know you were in the room too at the time. And Susan is just a child, as the adult. When I saw her first, I couldn't just stand by. Saving her was just out of a sense of duty as an elder. But Sally, if anything were to happen to you, I would die with you," Boris said gently as he took hold of Sally's hand. Just as he was about to continue his confession, the sound of a cup hitting the floor suddenly came from the doorway. Susan stood outside the door with reddened eyes, a shattered cup at her feet, her face filled with grievance. She had heard Boris's words just now. Boris's face instantly turned deathly pale, but before he could explain, Susan covered her face and ran away crying. Boris instinctively wanted to chase after her, but meeting Sally's cold gaze, he forcibly held himself back. "That silly little girl," Boris said with a smile. "Never mind her, Sally, you're the most important one in my heart." For the next few days, Boris also stayed by Sally's side without leaving for a moment. He turned down all his work and took meticulous care of Sally, personally feeding her, applying her medicine, and helping her wash her hands and feet. He even followed Sally to the bathroom, refusing to let her leave his sight for even a second. Until one day, news came from the Edwards family that Susan had gone missing. "Susan hasn't come home for an entire week," Susan's father said with a weary face. "Boris, have you seen Susan recently? Where on earth has that child gone?" Boris's face instantly turned terrifying. He immediately gathered all his subordinates and began searching the world for Susan. Sally watched calmly as Boris went mad, not a ripple in her eyes, because she was completely disappointed in Boris. No matter what Boris did, she wouldn't care anymore. Boris held absolute power in City A. Within just a single day, he managed to locate the missing Susan. Susan trembled like a frightened rabbit, shrinking into Boris's arms. She cautiously glanced at Sally before choking out, Auntie said I lacked virtue, that I seduced Uncle, so she sent me to a women's virtue school to learn discipline." This was the first time she had called Boris Uncle. Boris radiated an intimidating aura. His icy gaze fell upon Sally, the sheer pressure of his stare rendering speech impossible. "Sally, there are limits to jealousy. Susan is still just a child. What kind of place is a women's virtue academy, learning rules? That's just a place specifically designed to torture people." Susan was electrocuted and whipped there. She almost died inside. He didn't even ask Sally, directly passing judgment on Sally. If it were in the past, Sally would have been utterly devastated. But now, she no longer cares. "I didn't do it," Sally said calmly. "Believe it or not, I'm tired and want to rest." After speaking, Sally lay back down, leaving Boris with nothing but her cold yet stubborn back. Boris showed a flicker of emotion in his dark eyes, but before he could say anything, Susan suddenly clung to him in terror. "Uncle, I'm so scared. They called me a whore and said they'd sew me up down there." Boris immediately looked at Susan with heartache. Don't be afraid, sweetheart, as long as I'm here, no one will hurt you. Sally closed her eyes, unwilling to see, to hear, or to think about anything anymore. Tomorrow she would leave, and regarding Boris, she had nothing left to say except farewell. However, that very night, someone broke into Sally's room. Before Sally could cry for help, the intruder drugged Sally into unconsciousness, then swiftly covered her head with a black cloth and abducted her with practiced efficiency. When Sally regained consciousness, she found herself bound hand and foot, her head covered with a black cloth, and her mouth sealed with multiple layers of tape. What's going on? Sally was completely bewildered. Had she been kidnapped? Who kidnapped her? Boris's enemies. Still dazed, a chilling voice came from above her head. Boris's cold tone. Susan, is this the female instructor from the Women's Virtue Academy who abused you? Why is her head covered? Take off the hood. I want to see who has the audacity to lay a hand on Boris's woman. As soon as the words were spoken, Susan immediately showed a terrified expression. No, uncle, don't remove her hood. She timidly shrank into Boris's arms, then sobbed, Uncle, I'm scared. This female instructor tortured me for a whole week. I've developed psychological trauma. I'm terrified just seeing her face. All right, we won't remove it then. Boris gently comforted her. There, don't cry. Uncle will get justice for you. Listening to their conversation, Sally finally understood. This so-called Women's Virtue Academy was all Susan's own staged performance. Her kidnapping was undoubtedly Susan's doing. She went through all this trouble just to have Boris personally torment her. Sally broke out in a cold sweat. Boris's methods of torture were notoriously brutal. Falling into his hands would make death seem like a mercy. MMMPH. Sally struggled desperately, trying to make any noise that might let Boris recognize her, but her mouth was tightly sealed, rendering her completely unable to speak. As she thrashed, Boris strolled over casually. He ordered his men to pin Sally's right hand to the table, then picked up a hammer with a smile. Was it with this hand that you whipped Susan? Boris's voice carried a laugh, but in the next moment, with a swift motion, the hammer came down hard on Sally's little finger. Bang! As the saying goes, pain in one finger affects the whole heart. Sally was in so much pain she could barely breathe, but it wasn't over yet. Boris held the hammer and, amidst casual conversation, smashed Sally's ring finger. Once, he had placed a promise ring on Sally's ring finger, but now, he used a hammer to brutally crush Sally's ring finger. The excruciating pain made Sally see black, yet at this moment, unconsciousness became a luxury. Sally had barely passed out for less than 2 seconds before being jolted awake by pepper spray. Don't pass out. Boris chuckled lowly, his voice sickly yet magnetic. The night is still long, and we have plenty of time to play. Sally had never realized that a single night could feel so endlessly long. Her right hand, the one she used for experiments, had each finger Boris personally smashed into comminuted fractures with a hammer. The pain had become so intense that she could no longer even feel it, her desolate heart left with nothing but despair, but Boris wasn't about to let her off easily. Noticing her diminishing sensitivity to pain, Boris smiled and ordered his men to bring 2 vials of a special drug. This is what the CIA uses to interrogate prisoners abroad. Boris whispered like a ghost. It amplifies pain 100-fold. And no matter how much it hurts, you'll remain fully conscious. With that, Boris injected both doses of the drug into Sally's body. In an instant, all her senses were magnified 1,000-fold, and overwhelming pain came crashing down. Sally was tortured to the brink of madness. I heard you called my little Rose a whore, Boris sneered, and threatened to sew her lower half shut. Then I'll grant your wish by performing a suturing surgery on you. Sally, startled, immediately struggled with all her might, but she was already half dead from the torment. Rendering her struggles futile, Boris's henchmen stepped forward to pin her down. They tore off her clothes and forcibly pried her legs apart. Sally had nearly cried herself dry, yet couldn't utter a single sound, except for Sally and Susan. I won't touch any other woman's lower body, Boris said coldly. Assistant, you'll handle the suturing surgery in my stead. With that, Boris handed the needle and thread to his assistant. Seeing this, Susan pretended to persuade him. Uncle, why don't we let it go? I heard this female instructor is Auntie's close friend. If she finds out you're treating her friend so cruelly, she'll definitely be furious. Sally doesn't need girlfriends, Boris said in a chilling tone. She has me, and that's enough. The suturing procedure began. the steel needle glowing red-hot from the fire before piercing through Sally's flesh. Sally was already too weak to even move. Yet the pain felt excruciatingly clear. She couldn't scream or call for help, collapsing into despair over and over again. Before, Boris wouldn't even allow Sally to wear short skirts. He once declared domineeringly that only he could look at his woman, but now, he ordered his men to pry open her legs, then allowed a group of men to perform the suturing surgery on her. 28 stitches, a full 28 stitches. Even descending to the 18th level of hell might not bring such suffering, yet Sally's agony did not come from hell, but from the person she loved most in this life. After being tortured all night, by the next morning, Sally was discarded on the street like a broken doll. The rope on her hands had already been untied. She struggled to get up, then tremblingly removed the hood. At this moment, her mentor called her, instructing her to send her location so that the country could dispatch special forces to pick her up and take her aboard the ship. All 5 fingers on her right hand were shattered with fractures, unable to move at all. Sally painstakingly used her left hand to send her location to her mentor. Soon, an off-road vehicle arrived, and several special forces soldiers jumped out of it. Seeing Sally's pitiful state, even the special forces soldier couldn't help but tremble in his pupils. Yi, what happened? How did you get injured like this? Sally shook her head, no longer wanting to say more. Never mind that, just take me to the base first. After I get to the base, I hope you'll erase all my information. I plan to dedicate the rest of my life to research, never to return, never again. The Special Forces soldier helped Sally into the off-road vehicle. As soon as she got in, Sally received a text message from Boris. Sally, don't be angry. If you suspect anything between me and Susan, I'll send Susan abroad tomorrow and never see her again. You're the most important person in my life. I love you more than anything. Reading this text message, Sally's hands trembled uncontrollably. Suddenly, she remembered how Boris had kissed the golden heart-shaped necklace with a hidden micro-camera around her neck before she left with the research team last time. Whispering in a paranoid and sickly tone, Sally, you're mine. Don't even think about running away. You'll never escape my grasp. At that time, Sally willingly put on that heart-shaped necklace, voluntarily submitting to his control, willingly becoming a plaything in his hands. But now, Sally has taken off the necklace and asked a Special Forces soldier to mail it back to Boris. After removing the necklace, she felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The breeze drifted through the car window, gently caressing her face. She closed her eyes, savoring the hard-won freedom. Boris, I've always been able to fly free. Your palm is not the shackle, but my love for you is what imprisons me. And now that I no longer love you, you'll never find me again. After Susan vented her anger, Boris immediately wanted to go home to take care of Sally. Sally had been treating him with increasing coldness lately, which made him feel uneasy. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to lose Sally. This feeling was driving Boris crazy. He had an almost pathological possessiveness and controlling desire over Sally, and he would never allow Sally to escape his control. Seeing Boris so anxious to return, Susan flashed a look of jealousy and resentment in her eyes. She threw herself into Boris's arms and said with a sob, Uncle, are you leaving me again? Please, don't go. Okay, I know you're worried about Auntie, but I'm your wife too, and after being abused for so long at the Women's Virtue Academy, I'm traumatized. Without you by my side at night, I'm too scared to sleep. Uncle, I'm not trying to compete with Auntie for your attention, but could you stay with me a few more days? I really need you right now. Susan had tears glistening in her eyes. Looking utterly pitiful, remembering how much she had suffered at the Women's Virtue Academy, Boris couldn't help but soften his heart. All right, I'll stay with you for a few more days then, Boris said in a deep voice. Be good and don't hold a grudge against your aunt. She's just hostile toward you because she loves me too much. At this point, Boris paused slightly before changing the subject. Sally has been so hostile toward you lately. Has she noticed something? It's too dangerous for you to stay in the country. I'll arrange for you to go abroad soon, and you should never see Sally again. It'll be better for both of you. Hearing this, Susan pouted discontentedly. I'll listen to Uncle, but after I go abroad, you must visit me often, otherwise, your little rose will wither from loneliness. Boris couldn't help but laugh. He reached out and affectionately patted Susan's head. Don't worry, Uncle will be fair. 1 month for you, Sally, 1 month. I won't favor either of you. For the next few days, Boris stayed by Susan's side without leaving for a moment. But he didn't forget Sally either. While staying with Susan, he kept sending messages to Sally. Sally, there's an issue with a project overseas. I need to fly over to handle it. Be good, I'll be back soon, Sally. Have you been eating properly while I'm away? You have a sensitive stomach, so make sure to have your meals on time. I'll be back soon, and if I find you've lost weight, you're in for a spanking from your husband. Sally, I miss you so much. Every minute and every second without you is torture. Do you miss me? However, Boris's messages all went unanswered. Sally didn't reply to a single one. This made Boris increasingly uneasy. In the past, whenever he messaged Sally, no matter what he sent, Sally would always reply gently. Even if he just sent a simple "I miss you," Sally would respond with "me too." But now, no matter what he sends, Sally no longer replies. Boris couldn't sit still any longer. Despite Susan clinging to him and refusing to let him leave, he still abandoned Susan and sped all the way home. He had to see Sally, immediately, right now, without a moment's delay, speeding all the way home. Before even entering the door, Boris sensed something was wrong. Because all the lights in the house were off, the entire villa was plunged into darkness, not a single light was on, and there were no guards at the entrance. Boris felt his heart sink. What happened? Where are the guards? How could they abandon their posts without his orders? Having acted with excessive ruthlessness when he first came to power, Boris had made many enemies, fearing they might target Sally. He had spent a fortune hiring a group of recently discharged veterans from the military to serve as guards for the villa. Every guard is armed and patrols the villa around the clock, ensuring no suspicious individuals can get anywhere near the villa. But now, the guards at the entrance are gone, and those responsible for patrolling are nowhere to be seen. Boris felt a sense of foreboding. Without a second thought, he rushed into the villa at top speed and shouted, "Sally, Sally, where are you? Answer me immediately if you can hear me." Yet the entire villa was eerily empty. Not only was Sally missing, but there wasn't even a single servant left in the villa. What's going on? Could it be enemies coming for revenge? Boris thought anxiously. Impossible, there's no sign of a struggle in the house, and how could his enemies make everyone in the entire villa disappear without a trace? Boris couldn't be bothered to think too much. He directly took out his phone and called the captain of the villa's guards. The call was quickly answered. Boris had a dark expression, exuding a terrifying aura. "Clay, why are all the guards in the house gone? You'd better give me a reasonable explanation, or I'll make sure you're crushed to ashes." "Mr. Boris, wasn't it you who gave us a vacation and told us not to come this month?" the captain of the guards on the other end of the line said with a puzzled expression. "When did I give you all a vacation?" Boris was so angry he could barely contain himself. "A week ago," the captain of the guards replied respectfully. "You told me on the phone. You said you were taking the young mistress on a trip and gave all the guards, as well as the household servants, a month off." As he spoke, the captain forwarded Boris the screenshot of the vacation notice to Boris. Upon receiving the screenshot, Boris was completely stunned. He had never granted leave to the guards. And those messages were definitely not sent by him. "I didn't send those messages," Boris raged. "My phone must have been hacked. For something this serious, couldn't you have called to confirm with me?" "But I did confirm," the captain said defensively. "I called you, but you weren't available at the time. Miss Susan answered the phone for you. I repeatedly confirmed with her several times, and she clearly told me the message was genuine, even instructing us to withdraw that very night." All of this was actually Susan's scheme. The guards had the villa under airtight surveillance. Without dealing with them, Susan's hired kidnappers stood no chance of abducting Sally, so she secretly used Boris's phone to send a vacation notice to the guard captain, dismissing all the guards. Then she arranged for someone to infiltrate the villa and kidnap Sally. After completing all this, she deleted both the chat logs and the call records with the captain, leaving Boris completely in the dark. Now, a full week after Sally's kidnapping, Boris has finally glimpsed the tip of the iceberg. "Get back here immediately." Boris could no longer suppress the overwhelming fury in his heart. "And stop by the suburban villa on your way back to kidnap Susan and bring her here too." Soon, the captain of the guards returned to the villa with all the guards in tow. Also brought along was Susan, still in her pajamas. Boris's expression was terrifyingly grim, casting an oppressive atmosphere over the entire villa. His icy gaze, sharp as a blade, fell upon Susan. "Explain yourself. Why did you take my phone and secretly message Clay, telling him to leave with all the guards?" "Uncle, what are you talking about?" I don't understand. Susan put on an innocent and clueless expression. I didn't send any messages to Uncle, nor did I ask him to take all the guards away. Stop pretending with me. Boris slammed his fist onto the table, causing a crack to appear in the white jade surface. Do you realize Sally is missing? She's been kidnapped. When the guards brought Susan over, Boris checked the surveillance footage at home. The surveillance captured Sally being kidnapped in its entirety. Seeing Sally being kidnapped, Boris felt his heart ache so intensely he could barely breathe. He wished desperately to travel back in time to save the woman he loved most in this life, but he couldn't go back. All he could do was watch the surveillance footage helplessly, watching Sally being taken away, powerless to do anything. In a fit of rage, Boris grabbed Susan by the throat, his eyes bloodshot as he demanded, "Tell me, did you conspire with my enemies to plan all this? Who are your accomplices? Who kidnapped Sally?" Susan sobbed pitifully. "Uncle, I didn't. I really didn't. Sally is your wife, but she's also my aunt. How could I possibly conspire with outsiders to kidnap my own aunt? Uncle, you must believe me. I never touched your phone, nor did I receive any call from Clay. Clay is framing me. He's the real traitor. He must be the one who conspired with outsiders to kidnap Aunt." This explanation does hold water. Clay is also highly suspicious. After all, it was he who dismissed all the guards from the villa. Boris released Susan, his expression shifting unpredictably, already on the verge of an outburst. Yet, at this tense moment, the doorbell suddenly rang, and a Special Forces soldier entered carrying 2 folders. "Is Boris here?" the Special Forces soldier said. "I have 2 confidential documents here. The commander specifically instructed me to ensure you personally sign for them." The Cleveland family wields immense power and indeed has connections with the military. Thus, Boris suppressed his overwhelming rage and stepped forward with a darkened expression to sign for the documents. After signing, he opened the folder and froze on the spot, because inside the 2 folders, one contained the golden heart-shaped pendant he had given to Sally, while the other held a divorce certificate. As early as half a month ago, Sally had personally submitted the signed divorce agreement to the Civil Affairs Office. The divorce certificate has finally been processed. Since Sally is currently on a classified national mission, the divorce certificate was immediately taken away by military personnel after being processed. Later, the military arranged for the divorce certificate to be mailed to Sally. Sally kept her copy of the divorce certificate and then requested the military personnel to deliver Boris's copy of the divorce certificate to Boris. "As long as the items are delivered, that's enough," Sally said. "Don't mention anything related to me to him. I no longer want to see him or have any connection with him." In reality, Sally had all her information erased by the military after entering the base. Whether this divorce certificate is given to Boris or not no longer holds any meaning. But Sally wanted to make a clean break with Boris. Not only did she never want to see him again, but she also refused to remain his wife in name. So in the end, she decided to have the military deliver the divorce papers to Boris. With the divorce finalized, they were completely settled and done with each other. The moment he saw the divorce papers, Boris could hardly believe his eyes. He grabbed the Special Forces soldier who delivered them and furiously demanded, "What's the meaning of these divorce papers? When did Sally and I get divorced? Who gave you the divorce certificate? Sally, where is she now? By what right did you issue divorce papers to me and Sally without our consent? We're not divorced. We'll never divorce in this lifetime. For Sally and me, there's only death that parts us, never divorce." Yet no matter how Boris raged, the Special Forces courier had only one response: "I'm sorry, my duty was solely to deliver this to you. I know nothing about anything else." Boris couldn't get any answers and could only vent his anger by smashing things. After nearly destroying the entire living room, he finally calmed down and turned his attention to the second file delivered by the Special Forces soldier. Inside that file was the golden heart-shaped necklace Sally he had given her, and inside the necklace was the pinhole camera he had deliberately installed. This pinhole camera is his eyes, helping him monitor Sally's every move at all times. Perhaps the camera holds the answers to all the questions. "Someone, bring a projector here," Boris commanded sharply. He wanted to see clearly what the camera had captured. Why, out of the blue, Sally had disappeared. And where the hell did this damned divorce certificate come from? Soon, the guards brought in a projector. Boris then ordered his subordinates to display the surveillance footage captured by the pinhole camera onto the projector. As soon as the footage was projected, Boris saw Sally's kidnapping scene from that night. His heart instantly tightened. Although he had already seen it once through the home surveillance, he still gritted his teeth in anger. He even wished he could rush into the footage and personally tear apart the two scumbags who kidnapped Sally, but soon, things took an unexpected turn. Boris saw on the surveillance footage that the two scumbags who kidnapped Sally covered her head with a black cloth. Then they brought Sally before him. At this moment, Boris finally got a clear look at the faces of the two kidnappers. They were Susan's bodyguards, in the surveillance footage. Susan's bodyguards brought Sally before Boris and loudly declared, "Mr. Boris, she is the female instructor from the Women's Virtue Academy who abused Susan." Sally, with her head covered by the black cloth, Boris didn't recognize her. Outside the surveillance footage, Boris completely broke down. Is this a joke? The person he had abused all night that day was actually Sally, whom he had doted on since childhood, holding her in his hands afraid she might fall. And keeping her in his mouth afraid she might melt. No, this absolutely can't be. There must be some mistake. How could that hooded female instructor be his Sally? In moments of extreme despair, people instinctively deny the truth. And Boris was no exception. But the surveillance footage couldn't be faked. He watched helplessly as his own image in the footage walked towards Sally with a hammer. Enough, stop. In a fit of rage, Boris swung a chair and smashed the projector. He didn't have the courage to watch the scenes that followed, nor could he accept that he had actually tortured Sally all night long. He used a hammer to crush Sally's 5 fingers, injected her with drugs to amplify her senses, and even ordered his subordinates to perform a lower body suturing surgery on Sally. What has he done? At this moment, Boris felt his entire world collapse. He couldn't imagine how desperate Sally must have been that night, in the midst of his breakdown. Clay suddenly offered him a meaningful consolation. "Mr. Boris, you shouldn't blame yourself too much. You were deceived by a villain, which is why you tormented the young mistress. It's not your fault." When he mentioned the words "deceived by a villain," Clay deliberately glanced at Susan. Just now, Susan slandered him as a traitor, so naturally he would seize the opportunity to take revenge. His words successfully awakened Boris. Boris struggled free from his agony, then glared at Susan with bloodshot eyes, his gaze filled with fury. With just one glance, Susan was so terrified that she immediately fell to her knees. "Uncle, it wasn't me. I know nothing about this." After kneeling on the ground, Susan continued to feign ignorance, tearfully defending herself. "I was framed. Someone must have bribed my bodyguards and incited them to do this." Unfortunately, no matter what she says this time, Boris won't believe her anymore. Boris coldly stepped closer to Susan, holding the iron rod Clay had just handed him. "Bitch." Without a shred of mercy, Boris swung the iron rod at Susan. "I treated you so well, yet you schemed against me like this. Sally is my life. From childhood till now, I've never let anyone lay a finger on her. But you used such a vile trick to make me abuse Sally with my own hands. I'd rather have 5 of my own fingers broken than let Sally suffer even a scratch." Boris cursed furiously as he swung an iron rod at Susan with brutal force. Susan was soon beaten bloody, but Boris remained unsatisfied. He ordered his men to pin Susan's hands on the table, then screamed hysterically, "Someone, bring me a hammer." Susan's face instantly turned deathly pale with terror. She cried desperately, "No, uncle, I know I was wrong. Please spare me. I'll never dare again." But what answered her was Boris's ruthless sneer. "Everyone who hurt Sally will pay 10-fold, 100-fold. Susan, prepare yourself. Tonight will be long, all night." Susan's screams echoed over the villa. Boris kept his word. Everyone who hurt Sally would pay 10-fold, 100-fold. So that night, his abuse of Susan was even more brutal and inhuman. Susan had schemed to shatter Sally's 5 fingers, so he crushed all 10 of Susan's fingers and toes. Susan was left completely broken. Not only that, he also pulled out Susan's teeth one by one, then personally used steel needles to sew shut Susan's slanderous mouth. Of course, along with being sewn shut, Susan's lower body was also stitched up. All the pain Sally had endured that night, he repaid Susan 10-fold. In the end, Susan was tortured beyond recognition. Unable to even cry out, Boris cast a cold glance at her, then ordered in a sinister tone, "Lock her in the dungeon, assign someone to watch her closely. She must not be allowed to die. After I retrieve Sally, I'll deal with her slowly." "Yes, sir." The guards responded respectfully, then dragged Susan into the dungeon. After dealing with Susan, Boris could think of nothing but Sally. He had to find Sally immediately and explain everything to her. He was also a victim. He knew nothing about what happened that night, without the slightest hesitation. Boris immediately ordered all his subordinates to be assembled and commanded them to conduct a full-scale search for Sally's whereabouts. "I don't care what methods you use, you must find Sally within 3 days, Boris snapped sharply. "My patience is limited. And you know the consequences if you fail. The Cleveland family holds immense power in City A, so finding someone shouldn't be difficult." When Susan deliberately went missing before, Boris's subordinates located her in just 1 day. But in the search for Sally, Boris's men kept hitting walls at every turn. Because Sally's all information had been erased by the military regarding Sally, they couldn't find any clues. 3 days later, Boris's subordinates found nothing. Boris flew into a rage, and all his men were whipped. No matter how cruel Boris's punishments were, they simply couldn't find her. Boris's men were at their wits' end, just as he was at his wits' end. Boris suddenly remembered that the person who delivered the documents to him that day was a Special Forces soldier. How could his Sally be involved with a Special Forces soldier? The Edwards family was just an ordinary wealthy family with no connections to the military. So why would a Special Forces soldier deliver documents for Sally? With this question in mind, Boris immediately launched an investigation. The Cleveland family have relatives in the military. Military intelligence is the hardest to obtain, but fortunately, the Cleveland family is indeed powerful. Despite some effort, Boris managed to find out that Sally had joined a classified scientific research project involving state secrets, with its base located in the Atlantic. Without any hesitation, Boris immediately flew to the Atlantic. Sally was involved in a classified scientific research project, so naturally, the project's base wasn't a place just anyone could enter. But the Cleveland family also owns a pharmaceutical company, and their pharmaceutical company collaborates with the military as well. Additionally, Boris had relatives in the military, so after some maneuvering, he entered the Atlantic Pharmaceutical Research Base as a consultant. At this very moment, Sally was leading the research team in extracting medicinal compounds from a recently captured octopus. The drug they were developing this time was related to marine life, which is why the base was located in the Atlantic. The self-healing ability of octopuses is astonishing. Their tentacles can regenerate indefinitely after being severed, Sally said. "Our mission this time is to extract this regenerative factor from the octopus's tentacles and develop it into a drug. Once the drug extraction is successful, the entire pharmaceutical field will achieve epoch-making progress." Originally, Sally was the technical backbone. She was very familiar with high-end medical equipment and exceptionally skilled at operating these devices to extract drug compounds. But before coming to the base, Boris smashed her fingers with a hammer. All 5 fingers on her right hand suffered comminuted fractures. Although the military immediately arranged for top-tier doctors to perform surgery on Sally upon her arrival at the base, comminuted fractures are irreversible. Sally's right hand was permanently disabled, rendering her unable to operate instruments anymore. There was no other choice. She had to shift her focus to theoretical research while simultaneously teaching other members of the research team the practical aspects. When Boris found Sally, she was in the base's laboratory instructing a graduate student on how to operate the equipment to extract medicinal compounds. "Sally, I finally found you." Boris rushed over and hugged Sally without hesitation, exclaiming excitedly, "Do you have any idea how much I've missed you? I've been going crazy without you." Sally froze on the spot. She never expected to see Boris in a military base. This was a secret military base built by the government on the Atlantic Ocean, invisible on satellite maps. Moreover, the research project she was involved in was classified as a state secret. Boris, how on earth did he find her? She had already decided never to see Boris again in this lifetime. Yet Boris still managed to track her down. Sally's emotions were in turmoil. With great effort, she pushed Boris away, rejecting any physical contact. "Mr. Boris, we're already divorced. Please behave yourself." Facing Sally's cold gaze, Boris felt heartbroken and said with a trembling voice, "Sally, I know you're still angry with me, but I didn't mean to do it that night. I didn't know it was you who got kidnapped. I'm also a victim. I was deceived by Susan. This is all Susan's scheme to drive a wedge between us. If we really turn against each other, Susan will get what she wants." Upon hearing this, Sally gave a bitter smile. Susan has already succeeded, hasn't she? She got what she wanted by marrying you. And you held your wedding abroad. Boris froze abruptly, looking at Sally with disbelief before trembling as he spoke. How did you know? Because I attended your wedding. Sally curled her lips into a mocking smile. Sorry. I didn't have any spare change at the time, so I didn't give you a wedding gift. For a moment, Boris stopped breathing for several seconds. He opened his mouth and struggled to speak. Sally, let me explain. It's not what you think. I had my own difficulties. It's just a pity that at this moment Sally no longer wants to hear Boris's explanations anymore. So she interrupted Boris without hesitation. Hardships, Boris, you can fool yourself with that, but don't try to fool me. During those 2 years when you were disabled, I indeed didn't stay by your side to take care of you. But why did I leave? It was to cure you. For your sake, I went to the hottest parts of the desert, braved sandstorms, and searched with the research team for green plants that could extract medicinal compounds. How many times did we encounter quicksand, sandstorms, and life-threatening situations, yet I never gave up, because I wanted to cure you. I was more eager than anyone else on the team for the drug development to succeed. And what about you? While I was risking my life to develop medicine for you, you were rolling around with my niece. You've been fooling around with Susan for 3 years, carrying on behind my back the whole time. You even used business trips as an excuse to secretly marry Susan overseas. Boris, none of these things you've done can be excused as having no choice. You had no hardships. You just couldn't control your lust. Sally's words pierced straight to the heart. Boris felt so heartbroken he could barely breathe, yet he still tried to explain. No, Sally, I love you. I never meant to hurt you. What happened between me and Susan was completely accidental. You weren't by my side at the time, and I was paralyzed in bed. My whole state was utterly miserable. I couldn't accept being paralyzed, nor could I accept your absence. With all the bitterness in my heart and no way to vent it, I had no choice but to numb myself with alcohol. After you left, I was drinking almost every day. When Susan and I got together, I wasn't sober at all. I was drunk. I mistook her for you. Sally, you have to believe me. I don't love Susan at all. To me, she's just a child. When she took the initiative to care for me, I kept cursing at her like crazy, telling her to get lost. But not only did she not leave, she even took advantage of my drunken state to seduce me. Sally, I swear to heaven, I truly mistook her for you, which is why I ended up sleeping with her. I was just missing you so much at the time. I missed you to the point of hallucinating. Susan happens to look a bit like you, and I was drunk. Sally, the one I've always loved is you. You're the only one in my heart. Susan isn't even fit to lick your boots. Faced with Boris's affectionate confession, Sally's heart remained cold. Untouched by any ripple of emotion, she cast a cold glance at Boris, then cut straight to the chase. Boris, stop pretending to be the victim. The first time, you could deceive yourself by saying you were drunk and mistook Susan for me. But what about the second time, the third time, and all the countless times after that? 3 years, a full 3 years. If you had just once stopped yourself in time and ended your relationship with Susan, I would never have found out. And you would have had a chance to win me back, but you didn't. You kept making the same mistake, even going abroad to marry Susan. How dare you have the audacity to come back and beg for my forgiveness after doing something like that? 3 years, over 1,000 days. Boris had countless opportunities to end his inappropriate relationship with Susan, but he didn't. He arrogantly believed he had concealed everything perfectly. Sally would never discover the truth. Yet where in this world can walls truly be without chinks? The day will come when lies are exposed, and those who betray sincere hearts are utterly unworthy of forgiveness. Boris, I no longer wish to hear your excuses or see you again. Sally took a deep breath, then pointed at the door. Please leave immediately, otherwise, I'll have to call the military to forcibly remove you. Boris refused to leave, gripping Sally's wrist tightly, his dark eyes filled with madness and obsession. Sally, I won't leave. You are my life. Unless I die, I will never be separated from you. I know you're angry now, but how can our years of feelings be defeated by just a Susan? And I married Susan not out of love, but out of necessity. Susan is still a child after all. Though I was drunk at the time, we still ended up together. It was her first time, and I had to take responsibility for her. But I don't love her at all. You are the only one I've ever loved, and Susan means nothing to me. Boris said as he pulled out his phone, to prove to Sally that he truly didn't care about Susan at all. he directly pulled up the video from that night when he abused Susan. "Sally, look, I've already avenged you." Boris's tone was already deranged. "I told you, anyone who hurts you, I'll pay them back tenfold, 100-fold, even if the one who hurt you was Susan, I would never let her off." Watching the miserable state of Susan in the video, Sally felt nothing but shock. She never expected Boris to be so brutal towards Susan. She even found Boris terrifying, because she could tell that Boris had genuinely liked Susan in the past. When he loved Susan, he practically spoiled her rotten, but now that his feelings have faded, he can instantly resort to such cruel methods, tormenting Susan beyond recognition. Although Susan brought this upon herself, and Sally feels no sympathy for her, the speed at which Boris changed his attitude is truly terrifying. This man is capable of anything when he loses his mind. "Sally, it was all my fault before. I apologize to you. I repent." Boris clutched Sally's hand and pleaded desperately, "You can hit me or scold me, but please, don't leave me. You're my life. I can't live without you." Sally closed her eyes, covering the exhaustion in them. "It's too late, Boris, we can't go back anymore. After that entire night of torment, I feel no love for you anymore, only hatred and fear." After saying these words, Sally was physically and mentally exhausted. She had no energy left to continue entangled with Boris, so she directly pressed the alarm bell. Summoning the special forces stationed at the base, Sally was involved in a military research project this time, so armed special forces guarded every corner of the base. Although Boris could dominate outside, within the military base, he had to follow the rules and couldn't act recklessly. Otherwise, the base is located in international waters of the Atlantic Ocean, and killing someone in international waters is not illegal. Dare to cause trouble at a military base, one shot, and there's no need to dispose of the body, just throw it into the sea for the sharks. Sally, after pressing the alarm bell, Special Forces soldiers immediately rushed in with guns. "Dr. Yi. What happened?" "I suspect there are enemy spies who have secretly infiltrated the base," Sally said coldly. She glanced up at Boris and then mercilessly added, "This man is definitely not a consultant. I don't know his true identity, but I'm certain he knows nothing about advanced drug research. I suspect he's a spy sent by the enemy. You'd better take him away and interrogate him thoroughly." Boris's identity as a technology consultant was indeed a disguise. Only the top military officials knew his true identity, and the special forces guarding the base had no idea who he really was. Thus, Sally's words immediately put the special forces on high alert. They instantly raised their guns and aimed at Boris, shouting, "Hands up, don't move." Boris never expected that Sally would go so far as to falsely accuse him of being an enemy spy just to get rid of him, and he indeed concealed his true identity, once taken away by the special forces. His real identity would inevitably be exposed. The Cleveland family has connections with the military. While the military might not necessarily act against him, it would become much harder for him to enter the base again while hiding his identity. Sally, being the highly intelligent female scientist she is, knew that if she told the special forces that Boris was her ex-husband who was now harassing her, they might consider it Sally's personal matter and be reluctant to intervene. Moreover, they would likely think that since Boris could infiltrate a military base while hiding his identity, he must have powerful backing. Provoking him over a female scientist wouldn't be worth the trouble. By all accounts, the special forces wouldn't be willing to wade into this muddy water. But now, Sally claims she suspects Boris is an enemy spy, so the special forces will definitely be on high alert, regardless of whether Boris is actually a spy or not. They'll have to detain Boris for interrogation. Once things escalate, Boris's hidden identity will be exposed, and the military will have no choice but to expel Boris, and once expelled, Boris will find it harder than climbing to the sky to return. "Sally, do you really hate me this much?" Boris looked at Sally with sorrow. "To avoid seeing me, you'd even accuse me of being a spy for the enemy country." Sally averted her gaze, no longer willing to look at Boris. "I don't know you. Please don't try to claim any connection with me." Her cold attitude once again deeply wounded Boris. Boris smiled bitterly. "Sally, you're truly heartless, but no matter how cruel you are, I will always love you. I won't let you leave me, even if you hate me. I'll keep you by my side," Boris said as he unbuttoned his trench coat, revealing explosives strapped all over his body underneath. In an instant, the entire base went into lockdown. The research team members scattered and fled. While Special Forces soldiers in bulletproof vests rushed forward with shields, "Mr. Boris, regardless of your motives, I demand you surrender your weapons immediately," the base commander said coldly. "You're surrounded, there's no escape." Hearing this, Boris smiled. "Not necessarily, this is indoors, your snipers can't get a clear shot at me, and from where I'm standing now, I can see every single one of your soldiers. If anyone makes a sudden move to shoot me, I'll immediately press the detonator and take us all out together." Upon hearing this, the base commander's face instantly darkened to an extreme degree, because Boris was right, indoor snipers couldn't land a headshot, though the Special Forces had guns. Any move they made would be instantly noticed by Boris. Even though the Special Forces had guns, they couldn't act recklessly because no one could guarantee they could shoot Boris dead before he detonated the explosives. "State your terms," the base commander said with a dark expression after a moment of contemplation. "Negotiating with Boris, I know you're not a spy from an enemy country, and there's no need for you to sacrifice yourself and drag us all to hell." Finally, "Someone who understands," Boris laughed. "That's right. I have no interest in whatever your base is researching. I just want to take Sally with me. As long as Sally leaves with me, I'll disarm the explosives, and no one will get hurt." In an instant, everyone's gaze focused on Sally. Sally's face turned slightly pale, her eyes filled with anger as she glared at Boris, then gritted her teeth and said, "Boris, you're truly despicable, using the lives of everyone in the base to threaten me." "Sally, I only did this because I love you so much." Boris clutched his heart and said, "Because for me, if I can't be with you, I'd rather die." Sally's expression instantly darkened further. Boris's tactic was despicable, but undeniably effective. Sally, by nature kind-hearted, could never stand by and watch Boris detonate the explosives, killing everyone, so she had no choice but to grit her teeth and agree to Boris's demand. "Fine, Boris, I'll go with you." As soon as the words were spoken, Boris's clouded face instantly lit up with vitality. He exclaimed excitedly, "Sally, I knew you couldn't bear to leave me. Don't worry, from now on, I will stay with you alone for all eternity. I will never betray you again. You are my everything, and I will dedicate all of myself to you." After speaking, Boris called his subordinates and instructed them to arrange for a helicopter to pick him up. Soon, the Cleveland family's helicopter arrived. Since there was no place to land at the base, the helicopter could only hover mid-air. Boris's subordinates dropped down a ladder, and then Boris climbed aboard the helicopter with Sally via the ladder. Throughout the entire process, Boris held onto Sally's hand tightly, refusing to let go no matter what. It seemed as though he feared that if he loosened his grip even slightly, Sally would vanish from his sight instantly. Sally cast a cold glance at Boris and then remarked casually, "Boris, I've already followed you onto the helicopter. Aren't you going to remove the explosives from your body now?" Hearing this, Boris couldn't help but laugh. "Sally, did I scare you? Don't worry, I'll take the explosives off right now. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I just can't bear you leaving me. As long as you stay obediently by my side, I won't go crazy or do those insane things," Boris said while starting to dismantle the explosives on his body. Using one hand was inconvenient, so he released Sally. Meanwhile, Sally took advantage of Boris disarming the explosives to yank open the helicopter door. "Boris, I'd rather die than return to you," Sally sneered as she uttered these words, then resolutely leaped from the helicopter without hesitation. Witnessing Sally's determined gaze and her figure jumping off the aircraft without a second thought, Boris was utterly devastated. Without any hesitation, he too flung himself out of the helicopter. "Sally, I won't let you leave me." Mid-air, Boris roared with a ferocious expression, "Even in death, we'll die together." As the words faded, both figures plunged into the sea. Fortunately, the helicopter was equipped with a lifeboat. Boris's subordinates immediately inflated the lifeboat and then jumped into the water with it to rescue them. In the end, Boris and Sally were both saved, and Sally returned to the villa that had once caged her like a prison. After repeated shocks, Boris's mental state became somewhat unstable. He grew even more anxious and fearful, to the point where he was afraid that Sally would disappear the moment he blinked, so he simply cancelled all his work and stayed by Sally's side every moment. Even at night when he slept, he couldn't rest easy, fearing that Sally would escape while he was asleep. To prevent Sally from escaping, he had a pair of handcuffs made, one end cuffing Sally's right hand, the other end cuffing Boris's own left hand. "This is perfect, now you can never leave me." Boris said in a near-mad tone. Sally, bear with it. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but you'll get used to it in time. Hearing this, Sally curled her lips into a mocking smile. Ha, get used to it, of course I will. After all, you've already crippled my right hand completely. Even if you didn't cuff me, my right hand wouldn't be able to move anyway. A single sentence, like a dense cluster of needles, pierced into Boris's heart. Boris ached so much he could barely breathe. Sally. I'm sorry, Boris choked out. I know no amount of apologies can make up for the pain I've caused you, but if it means earning your forgiveness, I'm willing to do anything. After saying these words, Boris seemed to have made a momentous decision as he ordered his subordinates to bring a hammer. Sally, I told you, I won't let anyone who hurt you get away with it, Boris said coldly. That's the truth, even if the one who hurt you was me. I wouldn't let myself off either. Even though I didn't know it was you who got kidnapped at the time, I admit it was me who crippled your hand. Since I've broken 5 of your fingers, I'll now return 5 fingers to you. After all, my left hand is tied to your right hand. If your right hand is crippled, my left hand should accompany it in being crippled too, Boris said as he placed his left hand on the table. Then he picked up the hammer, gritted his teeth, steeled his heart, and without hesitation swung it down onto his own left hand. A heart-wrenching scream erupted. Boris's left pinky finger was smashed into a bloody pulp. Sally, as long as it eases your anger, I'm willing to accept any punishment you give me, Boris said through gritted teeth. You can repay me tenfold for all the pain I've inflicted on you. If I Boris so much as blink, I'm not a man. After speaking, Boris swung the hammer again, delivering a second brutal blow. Bang, with the second strike. Boris was drenched in cold sweat from the pain. Gritting his teeth, he said with sweat dripping, Sally, we are one. From now on, I will be your right hand, and you will be mine. Let's never be apart again, okay? But Sally didn't even glance at him. No matter how much he tormented himself, she would neither forgive him nor give him any response. At this moment, Boris felt that even having his fingers crushed couldn't compare to the pain in his heart, yet he forced a relaxed smile and said, It's okay, Sally, it's fine if you don't forgive me now. I'll spend the rest of my life making amends to you. With that, Boris smashed down a third hammer blow, then came the fourth, the fifth. His entire left hand was completely mangled, blood pooling across the table. Seeing this, Sally finally turned to look at Boris, do you think this is over? Don't forget what else you did that night. Boris's breath caught in his throat, even without Sally's reminder. He remembered all too well what else he had done that night. He ordered his subordinates to perform a suturing operation on the woman he loved most. That day, Sally was brought to the Atlantic base while her lower body was still in a sutured state. The Atlantic base had stationed doctors, but Sally was too severely injured. The base doctors dared not operate on her, so the base commander had to urgently contact the military, requesting them to send their finest military surgeon to treat Sally's injuries. When the military surgeon saw Sally's bloodied and mangled lower body, they all gasped in shock. Even now, after more than 3 months have passed, Sally's lower body still hasn't fully recovered. How could she possibly forgive Boris? Although Boris was unaware that day, he has become her eternal nightmare. Every time she sees him now, she can't help but recall what happened that night, and her body trembles uncontrollably. There's absolutely no chance of them getting back together. Boris clearly knows too well that the harm he inflicted on Sally was too deep and cruel. Even if all 5 of his fingers were smashed, or every bone in his body shattered, Sally could never forgive him. Sally, don't be like this, give me another chance, Boris said in agony. I know that to be truly fair, I should pick up a hammer and smash my own lower half to pieces. I can't become a rootless eunuch. I love you, and I still want to spend the rest of my life with you in sweet happiness. Sally, how about this? From now on, every night, I'll order my subordinates to whip me 99 times with a spiked whip, and before the whipping, I'll inject myself with a drug that amplifies my senses. If you're still not satisfied, you can take the whip and lash me yourself, or hit me with an iron rod. As long as it eases your anger, you can do whatever you want. But Sally just coldly turned her face away. I'm not interested in tormenting you, I just want to leave you forever. Her resolute tone deeply wounded Boris's heart. Yet even in pain, Boris still longed to hold Sally tightly, unwilling to let go. Hey Sally, I know you're angry right now, and it's okay if you stay mad. I understand, and I'll slowly earn your forgiveness, Boris said with a self-deceiving smile. For the entire month that followed, Boris kept his word every night. He would order his subordinates to whip him mercilessly with thorned lashes until he was covered in blood and wounds. Also whipped alongside him was Susan from the basement. Each day, she endured 99 lashes with Boris, after which the Cleveland family's doctors would immediately treat her, healing her just enough to keep her trapped between life and death. However, no matter how Boris repented or whipped himself, Sally remained unmoved. At the very beginning, Sally would still say a word or two to Boris, even if it was just sarcasm. At least she spoke, but after the first day, Sally stopped talking to Boris altogether. No matter how Boris repented or apologized, Sally kept a cold face and refused to respond with even a single word. "Sally, please, don't treat me like this." Boris was almost breaking down. "Say something to me, please, anything will do, even if you just scold me a little." Faced with Boris's desperate pleas, Sally only coldly replied with 4 words, "Let me leave." "Impossible, Sally, unless I die. I will never let you go," Boris declared without hesitation. So Sally turned her face away again and fell silent. She tried to block out everything around her, not looking, not listening, not thinking, as if Boris didn't exist. No matter what Boris said or did, she neither cared nor paid any attention. Boris went all out to please Sally. He bought her the most expensive jewelry in the world, personally cooked her favorite dishes, and took her on trips to relax. Yet no matter what he did, Sally remained silent, not even sparing him a glance. Boris, it was as if she had turned into a lifeless doll overnight, unable to cry, laugh, or speak. As time passed, Boris often felt the illusion that Sally was right beside him, yet somehow completely out of reach. After months of mutual torment, Boris finally couldn't take it anymore. "Sally, do you hate me this much?" Boris broke down. "I've already tortured myself into this wretched, unrecognizable state, and you still refuse to even look at me properly. I don't even dare hope for your forgiveness. I just want a chance to make it up to you. Is that too much to ask?" Yet, faced with Boris's hysterical outburst, Sally only coldly replied with 4 words. "Let me leave." Impossible, absolutely impossible. Boris was nearly driven mad by Sally's icy demeanor. Gasping for breath, he screamed with a voice that seemed to bleed, "Sally, I told you, unless I die, you'll never escape from my side." So Sally averted her gaze, reverting back to that doll-like state, unable to cry, smile, or speak. Even though Boris stood right before her, she remained icy, shutting Boris out of her world. She wouldn't speak to him, nor would she spare him another glance. Boris felt his heart bleeding. He grabbed Sally's chin, forcing Sally to look at him. "Sally, will you only forgive me if I die?" Sally cast a cold glance at Boris. They had been tormenting each other like this for over half a year, and Sally was exhausted. If death could free her from Boris, she was willing to try. Then Sally smiled. She stared fixedly at Boris and said coldly, "Boris, let's play a game." This was the first time in over half a year that Sally had smiled at Boris. Boris was instantly stunned. At this moment, not only was he willing to play a game with Sally, but even if Sally asked for his life, he would gladly give it. "Great." Boris eagerly agreed. "Sally, what game do you want to play?" "Whatever you want to play, I'll play with you." "Let's gamble with our lives," Sally whispered. "Boris, I can't forgive you, so I'll leave the choice to fate. Let's play Russian roulette. 6 chambers, 3 bullets. We'll take turns pointing the gun at each other's heads. If in the end, neither of us dies, it means fate has forgiven you on my behalf, and I'll follow fate's will, forgiving you one last time. And if one of us dies, the game ends, and both you and I will be free." Hearing this, Boris immediately grasped Sally's hand and declared passionately, "Sally, if you die, I won't hesitate to pull the trigger and join you in the next world." However, this heartfelt confession failed to evoke Sally's slightest emotion. Sally remained cold as ever. "Boris, if you die, I won't follow you in death. I'll forget you completely and live on." Boris felt another pang in his heart, but he said nothing, knowing he had long lost the right to ask Sally to die for him. The Russian roulette game was extremely dangerous. 6 chambers, 3 bullets, with a near 50% chance of death, yet Boris agreed, because he knew this might be Sally's only chance to forgive him. So, Boris ordered his men to bring the pistol. "Sally, I love you, and I can't bear to let you risk getting shot in the head by gambling your life with me." Boris gripped the pistol. "So instead of taking turns, I'll fire 3 shots myself. If I don't die in the end, it will prove that the entire universe is demanding you forgive me. You can't defy the will of the cosmos, you must forgive me." Hearing this, Sally lowered her eyes and softly replied, "All right," yet in her heart, she thought, if after 3 shots, Boris still miraculously survived, she would snatch the gun and blow her own brains out, because now, she would rather die than stay with Boris any longer. Boris had no idea about Sally's inner turmoil. He took a deep breath, then picked up the Russian revolver and pressed the barrel against his own head. "Sally, I love you." Boris gazed into Sally's beautiful peach blossom eyes and confessed with a smile. As the words fell, he pulled the trigger. Bang, a loud bang. It was a blank. Boris couldn't help but smile. "Sally, 2 more shots to go. I believe my love for you can overcome everything." Bang, another blank. Boris remained unharmed. "Sally, just 1 bullet left." Boris gazed tenderly at Sally. "I love you. May Cupid bless me now." Immediately after, Boris fired a 3rd shot. Bang. The bullet flew out. Blood spilled all over the ground. Boris betrayed love, and naturally, the god of love would not bless him. Looking at Boris's body lying in a pool of blood, Sally's eyes couldn't help but moisten. After all, the two had loved each other so passionately at that. And now faced with life and death parting, how could one remain unmoved? "Boris, this is truly goodbye." Sally retrieved the handcuff key from Boris's body, then unlocked the cuffs from her wrists and strode away. Now she was truly free. She would live well, just as she had promised moments before. Later, Sally returned to the Marine Research Base, devoting the rest of her life to scientific work and never remarried. Love is an unsolvable puzzle. She no longer wants to waste her life on elusive romance. Beyond love, her life holds science and distant horizons.